Hello and welcome. I'm Jodi Carlton, creator of Spectrum Relationships and your host for Neurodiverse Relationship Q&A. I created this program for those of you who are in relationships that are neurodiverse. So maybe that's you that's on the spectrum, or maybe it's your partner, or maybe you're just not sure. But either way, join me every other week for a Q&A session. And be sure to subscribe or follow my channel for updates on all the programs and courses that I have, and to watch or listen to tips to help you in your relationship. So, what will we talk about today? Okay, everybody. How's everybody doing? Happy day 2 days after Halloween. We had a really awesome time here down in Georgia. I'm in Georgia in the United States. The weather was awesome, so it was really nice for everybody to be back out and about on Halloween. So it was cool. I hope you guys had a good Halloween too. Okay, so it looks like our stream to LinkedIn has some tech issues, so I'm not sure what's going on there. So hopefully you're not trying to join me from there. But I wanted to just say I'm excited to be back here because I haven't been live with you guys for a couple of weeks, and I hope you were able to watch the videos that I premiered the last 2 weeks. And I have a really awesome thing planned for you next week. Some of you may have heard the podcast where I was a guest. I sent that out to my email list. I was a guest on Dr. Stephanie Holmes and her husband Dan on their podcast, and they are also neurodiversity marriage specialists focusing with the Christian community. And we had I was on a couple of episodes. We broke it into 2 pieces, and we had a great conversation about how faith and spirituality can really show up and be how it shows up in neurodiverse relationships and some of the things that can be problematic. But we also had a conversation about, she specifically asked me to talk about the differences between narcissism and autism, which there are definitely some major differences. And the video that we uploaded last week spoke to some of that. So I see a bunch of you are hopping on here, and let me go and make sure I can see my comments. So Nathan, hi, how are you doing? Yeah, so you're saying the Christian community is a very different dynamic, having been in Catholic and in evangelical circles. And so, yeah, there's a whole lot of differences just within the Christian community itself. But then just in general, spirituality and faith can actually can really show up in neurodiverse relationships in lots of different ways. And so it's very applicable. And so actually one of my first questions for the day has to do with that whole topic of narcissism. But I want to just encourage all of you. I have a few questions that have been submitted to us to our support email. If you're on my email list, you should have gotten a reminder this morning to submit your questions to us. If you're not on the email list, get on there, because that's how we let you know about upcoming events and coaching groups that are opening up, that kind of thing. My schedule right now is booked up for the next several weeks with consultations. I think I have a few openings. So that's another way that, if we have openings or we have some cancellations, sometimes we'll shoot an email out to let you guys know that I've got some availability. All right. So I should be able to see you if you are on Facebook, my Facebook page, in my Facebook group, or on YouTube. So be sure to comment or post your comments here. And I want to go ahead and get started though with, so one of our members had seen the live stream that I premiered. It wasn't live, but a video that I premiered last week about narcissism. And she had a question that I thought was a really applicable one. And so she's saying, I would like to propose the idea that although a neurodiverse spouse may have good intentions and may very well not be a full-blown narcissist, that there can be narcissistic traits in their personality that are distinct and different from the neurodiverse traits, like theory of mind. And she's saying, I hope this makes sense, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this. So yes, what I typically say about this topic is that we are multifaceted human beings, and there's not one particular, I mean, we have overlap basically. We have overlap of all of our different, what's contributing to who you see of us as a person. So we have our neurobiology, we have our traits that came to us, that we got from our ancestors through our genetic code. We have our experiences that influence, they influence how we end up interacting with the world. And so we don't know specifically what causes personality disorders. And I actually have another question today about avoidant personality disorder. But we do know that it's a combination of genetics and environment, so our experiences. So we do see that sometimes people with narcissistic type personalities, there may be a genetic link there. Now, that doesn't mean that just because you've had someone who's narcissistic or some of these other personality disorders in your family, that you or your children are going to end up being narcissists, or that your partner's gonna be narcissistic, because it all combines together to create the whole person. So in reference to narcissism and autism, these are very different things that can look similar because of some of the behaviors that we see in people who are narcissistic. Those of you who are neurodiverse may be accused of being narcissistic, but it's very different. However, what I have seen, and I don't know that we even have scientific research on this specific thing yet, but I can tell you what I've seen as a provider for the last 20 years, and more specifically the last 15 years working with autistic folks, is that one of these will emerge as more prominent than the other. So you can be someone who is neurodiverse. So you or whoever we're talking about meets the criteria, has characteristics and traits that meet the criteria consistent with an autism spectrum diagnosis. But that person may still have traits of narcissism and toxic type traits. How I don't usually see both of those being super prominent. It's usually one or the other. So you may also have someone who is narcissistic and has primarily narcissistic traits, but also has some of the traits of autism. So it's usually one is more prominent than the other. And this is a very, now I do want to just clarify, the word narcissism is being used a lot it's like this really common word that's being used a lot. And I've actually heard people say, well, we all have some narcissistic traits. And I want to just debunk that, because we don't. Narcissistic traits are very toxic. Now, this is toxic, meaning poisonous. These traits are destructive. And so these are character traits, personality traits, behaviors, toxic traits that are very destructive to self and others. Now, we all can be self-serving. We can all be self-centered at times. We can all be self-absorbed at times. This is a human trait. These things are human, and we all can exhibit this at times, these types of things. But those are not narcissistic toxicity. Narcissistic toxicity is destructive. It sucks the life out of other people. And we may at times harm other people. Sometimes that may even be intentional. But there's a difference between those momentary times in our life where we're reacting to something, or we're feeling attacked, or we're just having moments where we're not at our best. And the toxic traits that are intentionally meant to harm others. And also, people who are toxic and have narcissistic traits truly don't care about how others feel, and they only care about it to the extent that it gets them what they want. So they care in terms of knowing how their behavior or their actions are impacting somebody else, but they care about it not in a way that genuinely is concern for this other person, but in a way that if I can get this person to feel a way that gets me what I want, and sometimes that's power, control, feeling superior, or just flat out manipulation to get tangible things, money or time, or those are toxic narcissistic traits. Okay, Nathan is saying, yes, I think my dad suffered from narcissism, from bipolar disorder, while I got my Asperger's from my mom's side. It was the vicious living. It was the vicarious. I'm sorry, I need to put my glasses on. It was vicarious living, feeling living. It was feeling entitled. Okay, so I'm glad you said that, Nathan, because bipolar disorder is another commonly misunderstood diagnosis. And so bipolar disorder, you mentioned narcissism from bipolar disorder. So I want to just clarify, these are two very separate diagnoses. And people who are bipolar don't necessarily have any traits of narcissism. This is not something we associate with bipolar disorder. So bipolar, if you think of two opposite poles, like North Pole, South Pole, and one of these is depression and the other is mania. And now mania is not just the opposite of depression. Depression is, we all pretty much know what depression is. Depression is not just feeling sad and gloomy, but a very, very inhibited emotional state, very down, very hopeless. It affects us physically. Most of you guys know what depression is. Mania can be anything from a euphoric state, feeling high on life, to all the way a total break from reality. In other words, mania can speed us up to a point where we don't need sleep, but also we break from our ability to recognize reality. So I've actually worked with people who were manic that became delusional to the extent that they believe they can fly, and this is extreme mania. So the ability to recognize what's real and what's not can be very difficult when someone's having a manic episode. A lot of people think of bipolar as just being moody. We have mood swings. I'm happy one minute and I'm snapping at you the next. I'm excited and then I'm angry. That's not bipolar. That is human. And here's the thing. A lot of my neurodiverse folks mistake their partners as bipolar. I hear this a lot, you guys, because some of you who are neurodiverse have a very limited range of emotion, whereas the others of you have a very wide range of emotion. Neurodiversity is about extremes. So either very narrow or very wide. So those of you who have a very narrow range of emotion, this is your frame of reference. You swing this way when you're happy, and you swing this way when you're upset or sad or angry. Whereas your range may be smaller than your partner's. And so your partner's range may be here. So when they're happy or excited, they swing way over here. And when they're upset or angry, they swing way over here. Whereas you were here, your partner's here. Bipolar is more like this. Let me get in the frame here. So those ranges are way out here. But neurodiverse folks see these swings in their partner, and they're like, oh, you're bipolar because you have much, when you get upset, you're way angrier than I think is normal. Or when you get excited, you're way, and you're going back and forth a lot. Whereas folks on the spectrum, sometimes you stay more kind of at a consistent type emotion. Your partners may say, that they may ask you, are you excited? Are you sad? What are you feeling? And you may be kind of like, yeah, yeah, sad. I don't know. Um, and so this feels very non-emotional to a neurotypical person who has a pretty typical range of emotion. Okay, so I'm glad that you actually mentioned that, Nathan, and you're welcome about clarifying. Um, because and you said I don't want to disrespect my late father, and so that's why it's helpful to just get clarity on these things. Um, so yeah, so if anybody has any comments on this post, be sure and post them. I think I can see most of you, unless you're on LinkedIn. So back to what what the member had submitted. Yeah, with narcissism and neurodiversity, this is a really toxic combination, honestly. When you've got someone who has significant narcissistic traits but is also neurodiverse, this can really be a sociopathic person. And that's why it's so important to know, if you think your partner may be narcissistic, it's really important to determine whether or not that's truly the case, because a neurodiverse person is often very capable of learning and growing and developing the communication skills to connect and to close that communication gap that feels so disconnecting. It can feel very harmful. It can, and it is. I'm not saying that it isn't, but that divide is huge between neurodiverse and neurotypical partners. But some people who are neurodiverse don't actually have the ability to learn and grow. That doesn't mean that they're narcissistic. It comes down to actual ability, the abilities that we have, our brain's capacity to take on information and grow. And every diverse person falls somewhere differently on this individual vertical on the spectrum. Okay, I want to make sure I'm not having comments here. So clarity is really important, and that's why I have the course that I've mentioned to you guys quite a bit about how to determine if it's narcissism or neurodiversity. And if you can just go to the website to take the quiz on that, which is free, and then access the course if you want. Okay. Oh, by the way, speaking of ability, in a couple more weeks, I think probably 2 weeks from today, I'm going to be premiering a video cast, an interview that I did with a couple who worked with me over a year ago. They went through my private intensive coaching program and also the communication program, the Crack the Communication Code. Let me throw that up here for you. There we go. There's the banner. So they're over a year since starting to work with me, and it was a wonderful interview that I did with them on how they're doing. And they talk about how when they first came to me, this is a couple in their early 30s, I think, and they first came to me and they were at that point where the marriage was about to end. They were really struggling, considering looking at divorce. And they are absolutely thriving now, you guys, because of everything they've learned and all the work that they've put into it. So I can't wait for you guys to release that interview, which should be, I think, in 2 weeks here at 5:00 after next week with Dr. Stephanie and Dan. Okay. Anybody have any? Okay, I do have some comments over here. Oh, Amber is posting that link. Thank you, Amber. That's my assistant extraordinary, you guys. She's amazing. Okay, so I have another question from the Facebook group. So this member is asking me about the differences between autistic men and autistic women. And she's asking me if I have any slides or videos. And I don't have any specific slides, or maybe I need to do a webinar on that. That's actually a really good idea. But we will touch on that here. So yes, there are some very specific differences between females who are neurodiverse and men who are neurodiverse. And what I have seen, so here's some of the differences that I've noticed. First of all, women in general, and I'm going to be speaking in stereotypes and generalities here, you guys. That said, every single person is a different and unique human being. So this may or may not apply to everybody that is neurodiverse, or to you. But women in general come into this world with a set of social skills that men don't have in general, not just the neurodiverse population. And this is because females are the social glue of our society. We are the caregivers. We give birth and we take care of our young. Men, a lot of you love to participate, but I also know that a lot of you don't have that instinct, that basic instinct that women have. Not every woman, but in general, women have to recognize what a baby's needs are before language even exists there. And so we come into the world with a different ability to read social cues and to read nonverbal cues, because babies aren't verbal. All they can do is cry, but they have different kinds of cries. They have cries that mean I'm hungry, and cries that mean I need to be changed, and cries that mean my tummy hurts. And some women, some moms, still struggle sometimes to know what the cries are, but there's an instinct there. And so women just tend to have a better ability to read those nonverbals than men. So I would say most of the differences that I see in men and women are related to this social aspect. I don't see a whole lot of differences in the executive functioning difficulties. So this is our planning, organizing, our abilities to sequence. First I need to do this, then I need to do this. Ability to hold information in our mind all at once. So that's called working memory, and it's part of executive functioning. So while I'm paying attention to this, I can also pause and pay attention to that. Or I can have multiple tasks going in my mind at one time. Everybody on the spectrum tends to struggle with those types of issues. Men and women tend to struggle with sensory processing. So the sensory cortex of the brain is where our brain interprets all the information that it's getting from our senses. What we see, what we smell, what we hear, all of that stuff. Are we hungry? Are we tired? Are we cold? There aren't really any differences that I'm aware of between men and women in terms of who experiences what kinds of sensory differences, sensory challenges, both men and women. So the main differences are going to be in those social pieces. Women tend to be pretty good profilers. So women on the spectrum tend to notice the subtle behavioral cues that indicate certain types of personality traits. My daughter, for example, she's 18. She's an excellent profiler. So she can observe and really quite accurately and quickly assess a person's character pretty quickly. And she notices details that are fascinating to me, and she'll tell me how she's come to a conclusion about somebody. And she will have noticed details that I, as a neurotypical female, didn't notice. Now, she, though, still, and other women that are on the spectrum, still struggle with the interaction, the social interaction. So women are better at sizing up others and noticing those nonverbals, and may have a somewhat better or easier time with the social interaction, but still may very much struggle with, how do I initiate conversation? How do I know when it's my turn to talk? How do I know when someone even wants to talk to me? How do I go about dating? What's expected of me? What does my partner expect of me? Those types of things tend to show up in both men and women on the spectrum. So I would say the primary difference, and if any of you have anything you want to share, please do. But from what I've worked with, it's that social sizing up piece. Nathan's like, yeah, I totally acknowledge the female version of Asperger's. Yeah, it can look different primarily from the social profiling aspect of it. All right, let's see. So here's another personality disorder question. So this person writes in and says, how do you tell the difference between avoidant personality disorder and autism? And she says, I'm confused as to what my partner is. And so, okay, so avoidant personality disorder, this is another another diagnosis that's in our personality disorders cluster. And the main difference, so someone who's got an avoidant personality disorder, which means meets criteria for a diagnosis, is someone who is definitely going to be very socially, have a lot of social anxiety, and it's rooted in insecurity, a fear of being judged, a fear of being criticized, and this goes back to a self-worth issue and an identity, a difficulty, embracing self and feeling confident in self and that self-worth. So there's this huge fear, so much so that people with avoidant personality disorder may not even they're going to avoid social situations that might even be very beneficial to them. So, for example, someone might get a position, be offered a position in with a job or a community group that's a leadership type position, or something that's kind of a step up, but it would involve them being more social and in the more public eye. And someone with avoidant personality might turn that down, even if it means more pay at work or even more status or something like that, because of the fear of being criticized and judged. So folks who are on the spectrum, who are neurodiverse, may also struggle with social interactions. As a matter of fact, it's most people on the spectrum. Some of you may really enjoy being social, but it's also likely going to be draining after a while because of the struggle to read other people. So the difference here is, for folks who are neurodiverse, there may be those insecurities and even fears of being judged, but part of that also comes from not being able to read others very well and not knowing what I'm seeing. Am I, misunderstanding cues? A lifetime of being told that they did misunderstand something, or that something they said was rude or inappropriate. And so there's this concern, this feeling of, I'm nervous about interacting socially because I don't know if I'm doing it right, and I don't know if I'm interpreting it, and I don't know if I'm, so all of those questions are there. Whereas avoidant personality disorder, folks with avoidant personality don't necessarily have a problem reading others. They may be able to read others fairly well and know when it's their turn to talk, and understand that rhythm of conversation, but still there's that major fear of being criticized and judged. Hi, Clara. Good to see you. Glad to see that you're here. If anybody has any questions, you guys are quiet in the comments today. I'm usually got a comment feed that's just blowing up. I see that you guys are here. I can see the numbers, and there are folks here. So if you have questions or comments, just pop them in over here. Because I only have one more question that was submitted to me today. So then I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Does anybody have anything you want to ask me about before I move on to the next question? Speak now. Hi, Wendy. Good to see you. So Wendy's saying, I would love a small talk training webinar. What are some questions to ask? I just want to have some things in my back pocket. Okay, that's actually a really good idea too. Just to talk how to chit chat, how to do that. So if you're in a setting where small talk is the thing that's happening, what are some of those go-to questions that, aside from, how's the weather, how's the wife and kids, there are definitely some things that you can have, some topics that you can have. And so, Wendy, that's a great idea. Oh, you're right. Maybe everyone is out voting, and I need to do that. I actually need to do that. I'm going to have to cut you guys off right on the hour. Hi, Casey. Good to see you. So Casey's saying, my husband does for sure. He was offered promotions a handful of times, but never passed the stage of clinching it because he didn't have the social acceptance of his fellow workers. Although his performance was above and beyond, he eventually realized the stress of trying to be liked wasn't worth the extra status and money. Yeah. So that avoidance, that social anxiety absolutely can be and is a feature of neurodiversity. Absolutely. That's part of it. The difference being neurodiversity also has these other traits and characteristics as well. So if this was the main thing, avoidant personality is rooted in insecurity and anxiety, excessive insecurity and anxiety, whereas you will have that oftentimes, but not everybody who's neurodiverse actually is avoidant. Some people who are neurodiverse can be quite social. So that's the other difference. Avoidant personality is inherently avoidant. Someone who's neurodiverse, though, may actually not have this avoidant problem. They may still be stressed out about, am I reading people well? Not sure what that meant, but they still quite enjoy being social and actually seek out social experiences. It may drain them, but they may still enjoy it. Thank you for your comment, Casey. Okay, so let me go back to my pre-submitted questions. So this woman is in her 60s, and she's in a 2-year relationship with a neurodiverse man who she calls high functioning, also in his 60s. She says, thanks to your tools, our communication is going a lot better, and our relationship currently feels close. Great, that's good to hear. She said, I'd like to know if it's normal in neurodiverse relationships for the neurotypical to initiate most of the conversations about the future. And what is the most straightforward way to broach the topic of marriage, sharing, retirement, all that? She said, months ago, I tried to do this. I tried to initiate a conversation and it dissolved into avoidance style. We seem to have a theme here today, you guys. Avoidance style generalities on his part, and nothing specific came of it. And she says, I was in a bad marriage prior to this, and I don't want to waste energy if we're not on the same page. And, I'm not even sure about remarriage myself, but at least I want to have a conversation about it. So she basically wants to know, where are we going here? She wants to know from this man that she's dating, is he seeing, where is he with this? Is he seeing a future? Is he wanting to get married someday? And she says she initiated a conversation about this, but it didn't go very well. How do I broach the topic? So I'm going to just say the very fact that she is asked, that if you're here, the very fact that you're asking me this question tells me that you may very well have a passive style of communication, because when someone says, how do I broach the topic? That means that they would much prefer to tiptoe around it in a way and throw it out there, throw the conversation out there, and in hopes that someone understands what we're saying. So for example, an example of that might be, sometimes I might say to my partner, if I'm being passive, I might say, I just sometimes, I wonder where, what the future holds for you and me. What's that going to look like? Where's this going? Sometimes I wonder. Okay. Now, a neurotypical partner may realize that she's asking, or she's saying, let's talk about our future. But a neurodiverse partner is going to hear that she sometimes wonders about it. And okay, a neurodiverse partner may not realize she's actually opening that conversation up. Let's talk about it. He may say, okay, so she's wondering about it. What's for dinner? or he may respond with, yeah, I wonder too. Yeah, no, it's interesting to think about, but then not really know that she's saying, hey, let's talk about our future. Are you interested? So she's saying, okay, asking me, how do I broach it? Direct. Absolute direct. So if you are wanting to know what your partner is wanting, what your partner thinks, what your partner feels, your partner's goals, and let's say your partner is neurodiverse, ask specific questions. So the way to approach it would be, hey, we've been dating a while and I've been thinking about where I want this to go. Do I want to get married? Do I want to get married again at all? Do I want to get married to you? We've been in this a while. And so at some point, we need to decide if we're going to continue to pursue this or if there's not a real long-term future here. So I would like for us to talk about it. And I'm curious is an important word. I'm curious if you've been thinking about this and what your thoughts are. And if you haven't, let's talk about it now and brainstorm. So you put it out there specifically instead of dancing around the question, dancing around the topic, specific questions. Do you want to get married again someday? Whether it's to me or anybody else, is that something you think you want to do? Do you want to get married again someday? Or do you think that you would rather be single, that you would rather just date or maybe have a long-term a companion? If he says, yeah, I think I do want to get married someday. Okay. Are you considering marrying me? Is this something that you think you'd like to do at some point? And if so, what kind of time frame have you thought about this? Is there a time frame? And you can let your partner know that the answers are not going to be like, okay, whatever you say here is what we're going to do. Just say, let's just brainstorm this. Let's talk about the what ifs. What if we did get married? What would that look like? What would that look like to you? Do you think you'd want to live in my house, live in your house? Maybe you already live together. Or would you rather continue to live in separate houses? Very direct, very specific questions. Whether this is about your future in any neurodiverse relationship, you guys, neurotypical partners have a tendency to want to passively bring up topics that might be uncomfortable. We have a tendency to dance around, and it's crazy making for the neurodiverse folks. I've had so many neurodiverse folks say, please just be blunt with me. Put it out there. State what you're saying. State what you're asking. Okay, I've got some comments over here. Clara's saying she can be social, but also can get overwhelmed after a few hours or even minutes. So yeah, so you're somebody who likes the socialization, but also gets overwhelmed. That's the neurodiverse part. Okay, Ben, hi. Ben's saying, would you know of any groups similar to what you do that are closer to the West Coast? I'm hoping that their times would be close to the East Coast time. That's good for me. I can't do 3 p.m. I honestly don't. And I would recommend, or I would send you to it if I did. There are only a handful of people who are neurodiverse relationship gurus, and there just aren't that many of us. Unfortunately, we need more. And I actually hope to do a training program for counselors at some point in all my spare time. You guys keep me busy. But Ben, that's good feedback. And I do know that the 3 p.m.s, what he's referring to is my step 4 in Crack the Communication Code. And it's a coaching group with me, a 6-week coaching group. And at the moment it meets, this current enrollment meets Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. Because of what you're saying, Ben, I am planning in 2022, that sounds so weird to say, I am planning to start running this group more often and at different times, different days, and different times of the day, because I also have people on the other side of the world who are actually wanting to be involved as well. And so I'm trying to accommodate as much as I can for all these different time zones. I've had people join us we've actually had people get up at 5 a.m. in Australia. And then I've had folks come in at like 11, 12 at night from Europe. So I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. So we have a Facebook user who's watching. That says, hi, Jodi. My neurological girlfriend would like to know how to express her emotions without making my neurodiverse emotions feel overwhelmed. So I think you meant neurotypical. So my neurotypical girlfriend would like to know how to express her emotions without making my neurodiverse emotions feel overwhelmed. Okay. Well, this kind of comes down to you. You are the neurodiverse individual here. And so, one thing, a place to start is to know yourself and to know that you tend to get overwhelmed when she expresses intense or just expresses emotions. She gets to be her, and you get to be you. Neither one of you is right, wrong, good, bad. Uh, but you each get to be your unique selves. And so, what I would say is that it's not as much about how she expresses her emotions that keeps, because that puts her, she's not responsible for how you respond. None of us are responsible for other people. We're responsible for ourselves. So she gets to be emotional. But if you know that you're likely to get overwhelmed, and if you start to feel overwhelmed, it's important for you to pause. I was just talking about the pause signal with one of my private intensive couples that I was on a coaching call with today. It's important to know. So what my advice would be to your girlfriend is for you guys to sit down and have a conversation and work out a signal. Whether that I'm all about visual signals, because my neurodiverse folks and even my neurotypical folks, when we get emotionally triggered and we're overwhelmed, we have trouble finding our words. That's because the blood flow is not going right here as much, which is where it's our ability to actually talk and reason shuts down for everybody. And so we need to have a visual thing we can do that we don't have to find the words to say. So use a hand signal. It can be a stop sign or or whatever. And you agree upon ahead of time that if either one of you throws up the signal, or whatever, it's time to pause. Take a pause, because that means you're going into this overwhelm, which puts you into fight or flight mode, and your body starts dumping adrenaline and cortisone, and your heart starts pounding, and and so you either are going to retreat and withdraw, or you're going to fight like you're cornered, because that's what your body's telling you to do. I had a couple, I was telling my clients earlier today, I had a couple, this was probably 2 years ago, that we were talking about this very thing. And they went, I don't know if you guys are sports fans, but they went and bought a whole pack from Amazon of these little flags like they throw at football games or soccer matches that we call soccer here in the US, that the flags, and they bought a whole pack, and they had some in the car, and they had some in every room of the house. And so when somebody started to feel overwhelmed, they threw the flag. And that was like an immediate, it's like when the whistle blows. It's like when the whistle blows and the play on the field stops. And that's a way of going, stop. So my recommendation to you is to sit down and talk to her and say, okay, you get to be you. You get to express your emotions the way you need to express them. Now, the boundary there is no expression of emotion that is actually harmful to somebody, that's crossing a line. We don't get to call people names, even if we're feeling really, angry. We don't start saying ugly names and mean things. But if it's just a matter of a big emotion, like intense emotions that overwhelm you, the man I dated for a couple of years after my divorce, who was on the spectrum, I'm this really animated person, you guys, and you can probably tell that from my videos with you. And sometimes even when I was just excited about something that happened, I wasn't angry, he would go, "You're scaring me," because I was just like really excited and jumping around the room. And so if I was angry, if I was frustrated, it was really, really upsetting for him. And he actually at one point told me I was verbally abusive. And I was like, what? I was blown away that he thought I was verbally abusive. because I make it a point to never say really, truly hurtful things. I don't name call. But what we discovered after we were able to talk it through was that it was that I got louder. My voice got louder, and I don't mean, he would call it yelling. For me, yelling is like a screaming at somebody, like an out of control screaming. So we had different definitions of what that word meant. We speak different languages. We had different definitions. We also had different meanings for what a raised voice meant. So for him, a raised voice means I'm being abused, you're trying to hurt me. For me, a raised voice is animation and energy, but not direct intentional harm. So it was something we were able to figure out. And I was more cognizant of so this is kind of goes back to what your question is. I was more cognizant of the fact that he would get, so I would sometimes, if I could, rein that emotion in a bit, but I also sometimes needed to express it. So I would also chunk it a little bit. So here's some more advice for your girlfriend. I would express what I needed to say and then pause and let him catch up. So this is something she can do. Express something big, keep it short, 2 minutes, 3 minutes tops, and pause and let you process, let you respond, react, reflect, give you a little break. And that can help keep her from, if she is upset or angry about something, from also, sometimes we get ourselves going and we can just literally like be a train that's accelerating down the track, and we become a runaway train with our emotions. That was a great question. Okay. Hi, Diane. You're saying during shutdown or withdrawal, why is the neurodiverse partner able to connect and maintain with others, but not with me? Why do I always end up at the bottom of the list? Okay. So I'm going to assume that the withdrawal is related to you or something pertaining to you. So the household, the children. And so typically a withdrawal is from the difficult situation, not necessarily a withdrawal from life altogether, but it's a retreat from the stimulus. It's a retreat from the thing that is causing the overwhelm. Now, that said, that doesn't mean you personally are causing his overwhelm, but if it's something between the two of you, then that's the association. He associates it with you. So that retreat is going to be from you and not from others, because others, if there's not any overwhelm or stress, I mean, really, when you think about it, we're all this way, so we may be stressed out about something that, go to work and something goes badly with a boss or coworker, and we may just want to go home and not deal with that and not deal with it. But then we can still interact with our family, or we may have a friend, some type of disagreement or a fight with a friend. And so we retreat from that friend for a little while, but then we can still interact with other friends or function fine at work. We tend to withdraw from the thing or the general, situation itself. Okay, so you guys are finally starting to wake up. Everybody got back from voting, like Wendy said. I got more questions here. So, okay, so my Facebook person is saying, anything I need to ask or say, I bring it up. Sometimes he doesn't respond. Sorry, I've got something in the way on my screen here. Sometimes he doesn't respond, but we'll bring it back up after he has time to process. And yes, I know when I need to stop and just say, well, how about you take some time to think about it for a while and we can talk about it later. So I think you are the partner of my other Facebook user. It's what it sounds like. And then you said, thank you very much from both of us. Okay. Yeah. So you're saying you do bring things up, but sometimes he doesn't respond. Yeah. And that's the processing delay. So folks who are on the spectrum oftentimes do need that time to actually absorb, to take in, absorb, process, and then respond. And we as neurotypicals, we need to respect that. And truthfully, we'll get a whole lot more out of our partners if we give them that space and time. Sometimes we want to know right now, well, tell me right now, why can't we just talk about it right now? But then if we push that and our partner's still trying to process it, then we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to get more frustrated, and they're going to get frustrated and overwhelmed. So it's to our benefit to respect that need of our partner. And that likewise, when he was asking about big emotions, it's to a neurodiverse partner's benefit to respect a neurotypical partner's need to have those big emotions, because if that's who he or she is, to try to mute or turn the volume down on emotions over the course of time, like all the time, that's going to have a very negative impact on a person. And you won't get, it will negatively impact your relationship, your communication. We don't ever want a person to change who they are for us. And this is a big thing, you guys. All of us, men, women, neurotypical, neurodiverse, we have the tendency to want other people to be who we want them to be for us. We talk about, I'm gonna do a series on needs here soon. I may do it on TikTok and then push it out everywhere else, or I may just do a webinar. I don't know. The whole concept of needs, meeting needs and meeting my needs. We've kind of been sold a myth by our society, by culture, that it is our partner's responsibility to meet our needs. We cannot expect any other human being to meet our needs. And I know that there's a bunch of you probably going, what are you saying? Oh my gosh. There's some people that are getting upset with me right now, and that's okay. I will take it. But the thing is, when we place our needs on someone else's shoulders, then we're giving all of our personal power away to somebody else. And that doesn't mean that we can't have preferences and wishes and hopes and desires and requests of our partner. I like affection. I prefer to be told that I'm loved. But and to actually feel loved and accepted and valued is a basic human need. But to dictate to others how they love us, how they show us they love us, then we're kind of crossing a line there. Now we can tell them, I really feel loved when you fill in the blank. But then it's up to them to do that. They may not. They may not love us in the way that we're asking them to love us, but they may love us in their way. And so if we want to feel loved, it's helpful to look at, well, how does my partner actually love me? And I mean, there's all sorts of, needs. Needs are a tricky topic, and I don't want to get into it all today. Okay. Oh, so see, by the way, on the comments, my platform says Facebook user. So I can't tell who you are if you're a different person from Facebook talking to me. So it sounds like we actually have different people asking me questions on Facebook. So, okay, that's it for me as far as submitted questions for today. What other thoughts? Does anybody want to talk to me about needs? Okay. Someone says, if someone has a disability, they have no choice but to place needs on another person. However, the other person can say no, but they must then say their no to people in authority, so that the people in authority can meet the needs of that person in a paid capacity. Okay, so you're talking about a disability that's this is not the neurodiversity. This is something completely another type of disability. So yeah, someone who has maybe a physical disability, like if there are physical limitations, there are some kinds of needs that a partner can certainly assist with, and depending on your situation, if there isn't, like you said, paid help, then a partner may be the one responsible for helping an individual with those needs. Yes, and this is a really different kind of need, a physical disability. That is a very tangible, specific, life sustaining thing that somebody has to assist, whether it's a partner or a paid helper or a volunteer or something. That is a tangible, life sustaining type of need. The types of needs I'm talking about are the emotional needs, the need to feel loved, accepted, valued, worthy, um, even need sexual needs, needs as far, who's taking care of the house, the financial situation. I mean, we sometimes blur blur what is a responsibility with a need or a tasks, home management, managing children, who's going to do what around the house. Sometimes we blur that, and both men, both women, neurotypical, neurodiverse, all of us tend to blend those needs, or to blend those concepts as needs. Okay, you guys, it's almost 6 o'clock my time, and I do actually need to go vote. So, anybody have any more? I can take one more question if anybody wants to throw something at me. Otherwise, we'll call it a day. Anybody? Anybody? If you're as old as me, you'll know Bueller. Anybody remember that movie? Okay, I don't have anybody speaking up. So I will plan to see you guys. Actually, I'll be back here in 2 weeks. Oh, Tisha, I see yours. Let me finish this though. I'll be back in 2 weeks for Q&A. Next week, Dr. Stephanie Holmes and her husband Dan. I'm going to be premiering well, actually, they're going to be live here with me. And then, well, I haven't decided actually. I may be back for Q&A next week, or I may go ahead and premiere my interview with Matt and Jen, my couple that wants to talk, that sat down and talked to me about their journey. That's going to be awesome, you guys. Okay, Tisha, he says, curious how to navigate my need for physical intimacy with my partner. He shuts down every time I try to express this. I've explained that I can get my other needs met through friends, etc., but that this is a need that I need from him. So you're talking about your desire for intimacy, for physical intimacy. So this can range from affection, physical affection, such as holding hands or cuddling, all the way up to sex. And so maybe you have done it. You said he shuts down every time I try to express this. So I would pay attention to how you're approaching this in terms of expressing it as a need, because sometimes we have a tendency, I'm not saying you do this, but maybe something to think about. If you approach him from a standpoint of why don't you ever, or why can't you, or you're not, all these things that he's not doing, or if it comes across as a criticism, he's going to shut down. We all do. And this may or may not be how you're doing it, but I know a lot of partners fall into this trap of saying, I need this. Why can't you give this to me? Why don't you do this? Why don't you like this? Do you not find me attractive? Do you not love me? Those types of things. So what I would recommend instead is saying, hey, these are the things that really are important preferences of mine. And it's something that I really, in a relationship, it's something that I look to connect and bond with you. And more specifically, now sometimes neurodiverse folks struggle and withdraw if it's broad, there's a very broad, I need I need physical intimacy. That's a very broad term. So I would get as specific as possible and say, hey, I would like to hold your hand. And also be willing to initiate and say, can I hold your hand right now? Or I would like for you to run your fingers through my hair while we watch TV. Would you mind giving me a massage? I would like to have sex tonight. And I would like for that to be a quickie, or I would like to cuddle first. Is that something you are up for doing right now or later tonight? Sometimes folks on the spectrum need a heads up. Or even just ask some specific questions about his preferences. When are you more open to physical affection? I know sometimes mornings are better because for folks who are neurodiverse, because they're fresh and rested and not as sensory overloaded by, whereas in the evenings there can be a lot of sensory overload and overwhelm, and it's just not happening. So maybe open up the conversation of, when and how, what kind of physical intimacy are you comfortable with? Do you, what makes you, what is uncomfortable? What is something that you like better than not? So have that conversation about specifics. Give that a shot. That was a great question. Okay, you guys, it's always good. Love talking to you guys. And join me again next week for Stephanie and Dan. And of course, we've got the Facebook group, Facebook page, comments here. Oh, I forgot to toss this up. My calendar is really booking up right now, but if any of you are wanting to talk with me one-on-one, we start with a consultation. And so you can do just a basic 1-hour consultation, or you can do a neurodiversity screening that comes with a free assessment tool, quiz, and or you can do a comprehensive relationship consultation, which is where we really go deeply into the dynamics of your relationship. We have a couple of different assessments that I have you do, both of you. If you want to get in on that, make sure you get booked up, because going into the holidays, I'm starting to fill up some more. All right. I'll see you guys next week. Have a good rest of your week.